Recently, I jumped into the Ghostlor's beta, and at the time the experience was a little bit rough. That said, it was a beta for a game that's being worked on, and the developer's been extremely open to feedback both from the community after Steam Next, content creators like myself, and pretty much anywhere they can get it. So when they got in touch with me to let me know that they had made some changes to the game, I decided to hop back in and see how it went. First off, they added a bunch of small tutorials which pop up as you go through the early game. Things like letting you know that you can control-click to sell an item, or that if you want to attack in place, or always move, then there are keybinds for that. This is great because it leads to a more polished early game experience. They also added more storage in the form of a commodity cube. This stores things like materials, reagents, food, and even gems, all those stackables that you'll otherwise have cluttering your inventory and storage. While there isn't dedicated storage for glyphs yet, I could very much see something like this coming in the future, as that would make it a lot easier to collect all the different shapes you need to properly play Tetris. Speaking of glyphs, in my previous video, I had mentioned that it would be helpful to have a tooltip to see what the glyph does at a glance, and that's been implemented. So it's a lot easier to tell what glyphs I should be picking up and which I should be leaving on the floor now. The game's combat is also much improved. I played for a bit with the Hasashin class, my original character. I played with a Feral, which I leveled up, and then I leveled a Sentinel to try the range combat. I also spent a little bit of time with the experimental WASD, or in my case, arrow key, keyboard movement. The keyboard movement is still a little rough, but it is experimental, and when it was working, it worked pretty well. It felt very smooth to have my dodge on right click, my attack on left click, and be able to move freely with the arrow keys without having to worry about the fact that I might get stuck on an enemy trying to attack them. Although, even with just attack on left click and also move on left click, that has been improved significantly. I still personally prefer the style of running my attack on a keybind and keeping left click move only. Maybe this is because I've played that way in Path of Exile for 20,000 plus hours, or maybe it's just a little bit smoother, I can't tell at this point. Either way, regardless of if you want to run both attack and move on left click, move with a keyboard, or do what I do and have left click be move only and then attack on a separate button, the game will support all of these options, and having options is great. When it came to combat, and specifically difficulty curve, Ghostlor now has much better difficulty progression. Before, the first boss was really easy, the second boss was very challenging, and then it got easier for a while, before it finally started getting challenging again, right before the end of the story-based beta content. Now the first few bosses are relatively easy. You'll still want to dodge, you won't want to just stand there and let them hit you, but you're definitely able to do so. As you go through, and as you reach the end of the story, enemies get more and more dangerous to the point where a couple of hits will kill you, and the boss was hitting for about 70% of my health if I let him hit me in the final area. This feels a lot better, and it should do a better job of preparing players for the difficulties they'll face later, while giving them time to learn the game's controls and the game's systems. So, on all of the characters that I've mentioned so far, I ended up completing all of the content currently available. And on the Sentinel in particular, because that was the class that was by far the most fun to me, I played around with the Hellgate Island. The Hellgate Island is the game's version of Greater Rifts or maps in Path of Exile, where you go through randomly generated levels with ever-increasing difficulty fighting stronger and stronger enemies. The reason I did this on the Sentinel rather than the Hasashin is because in my first video, I lied to you all, and I'm very sorry. Spin to win is not the way. The way is utter devastation through ranged combat. And this is where the Sentinel excels. The Sentinel has several ranged abilities with extremely high damage effectiveness, meaning that scaling skill damage will increase their damage massively and allow you to one-shot trash. You can also get additional projectiles, pierce chance, and, best of all, they have a fairly low cooldown and fairly low mana cost so you can spam your skills. Right now, Sentinel is by far the most fun class, and the most fun I've had in Ghostlor. By the time I got my character up and running, and to about level 30 or so, it started to feel like regular endgame in an action RPG. I'd walk up to a pack of trash, I'd one-shot all the little guys, throw a stronger ability to kill the rare off, then I'd go over to a boss, and, well, in most cases, just one-shot them as well. Because this is still in development, I expect the scaling for the bosses wasn't quite tuned, as they didn't have significantly more health than a rare. They had about double, sometimes triple, which meant that with my damage, I was able to often kill bosses in 1 or 2 hits. I would expect in the future that they'll function more like bosses in the story, where they have a larger health pool and it's a longer fight of 30 seconds to a minute depending on your damage. Now, I do have some closing thoughts, but before I do, a quick reminder that if you've enjoyed this second look at Ghostlor, be sure to leave a like on the video as that really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if Ghost Lore looks interesting to you, then you can check out the game's Steam page, which I'll have linked down below. If you want to know more about Ghost Lore, you should subscribe to the official Ghost Lore YouTube channel, which I'll also have linked down with the Steam page. It's been a pleasure to work with the developers, and so far they've done a great job of not only being open to feedback, but also implementing it. It feels like night and day playing Ghost Lore originally to the way the game plays now. It feels a lot better, it's far more polished, and this time I didn't feel all of that awkwardness in the combat that I was running into before. So for such a short time, if you want to try the game for yourself, it's going to be releasing in early access today. Or if you just want to watch and see how the game develops, then I suggest subbing to Ghost Lore's official YouTube channel, joining their Discord, and of course, wishlisting the game on Steam. That way you'll be up to date on the game's future development. But now, what are my closing thoughts on Ghost Lore as a game? Well, as I got a little farther, and as it became more like an action RPG, I'd definitely like to see a loot filter in the future. The floor started to get covered with coins and covered with so many items that no matter how much I tried, I couldn't possibly pick them up, so I'd probably want to hide the things that I'm not interested in. There's definitely still going to be some work to fix the fact that enemies occasionally get stuck, improve the keyboard movement, expand the endgame, and probably some class balancing. But these are all problems that I feel fully confident the team's going to be able to handle. So if you like Path of Diablo, or if you like old school style action RPGs, then Ghost Lore is definitely a game to watch. In fact, I even did a little testing and tried to break the game. For example, what happens if you reach a 100% chance to block? Do you just become immune to damage, a la Wolcen? No, you don't. You'll certainly be a lot tankier if you stack up your block to 100%, but you don't become invincible, and that's really important, because invincibility would end up making the game pretty boring. So I'm glad to see that I wasn't actually able to break the game. Though, while I was messing around with things, I did notice a really cool feature when it came to me trying to freeze enemies. When you freeze an enemy, there's a little ice crystal that forms around them, and then, as the enemy starts to unfreeze, the ice crystal visibly melts. This is another nice little touch that I observed while I was playing. I wasn't able to permafreeze enemies, which is a good thing, and it's an awesome visual clue so that players know when the enemy is about to become dangerous again. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on Ghost Lore's development, and if you're a fan of old school action RPGs, I suggest you do as well. The game's come a remarkable distance since I first played it, and it's really fun. Originally, I was going to go in, mess around with my current character, and give a few thoughts, but my Sentinel was so fun that I ended up taking the character all the way up to level 42, which I believe is a little bit shy of the game's max level, at least based on how many of the glyph slots are still locked. I don't know, maybe the max level exceeds that, and a whole second page appears. I'll probably find out when I get there. But since today's theme has kind of been game development focused, I only have one question for you. What are 3 features that you think are core to a good action RPG? This can be anything from a streamlined leveling progression, a good endgame, a diversity of builds, or even something simple like the ability to dual wield. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and again, a huge thanks to the Ghost Lore team, and I wish everyone there the best of luck in their future development of the game. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to put them down in the comments below, or join the Discord, where you can ask questions, get build help, and hang out with the community. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. They're awesome, and they get to show it by having their name on screen in the credits of all my videos. So if you want to see your name here, be sure to check the link in the description. For more general gaming content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, and if you want a water bottle or a cool shirt, I have a link to my official merch shop in the description. I hope you learned something today, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.